Dan Snow. Welcome to the latest instalment of my video podcast for the 20th Century Battlefields series. This time I'm talking about Korea. And we really wanted to cover this because the Korean War is a forgotten war, I think, to many people. It happened just 5 years after the Second World War. Most Brits didn't really want to go. They wanted to rebuild the country after the Second World War. And no one really ever heard of Korea. And Dad and I didn't know that much about the war either. And so it was a fascinating experience. It was also great going out, though. I'd never been to that part of Asia, East Asia, before. I'd never seen that kind of South Korean, Japanese, Taiwanese kind of economic vibe. And it was amazing to see it up close. And the best thing about Korea, of course, is there's this divided peninsula, the third and fourth biggest armies in the world, eyeballing each other over this barbed wire sort of fence that runs through the middle of the peninsula. Here is this area called the Joint Security Area. Now that is North Korea, this is South Korea. I'm looking very unhappy here. It's very hot and I don't know why I'm looking so grumpy. I think it's because I was quite nervous about the North Koreans just being over there. So I've got a few other shots here. This North Korean guard is looking through the windows. Look at him in his sort of Stalinist uniform. There's the South Korean guard, aviators. They're all the finest specimens in the South Korean army to try and intimidate the Northerners. This one is such a typical scene, really, for us. This is behind the scenes, if you like. There's Ads and Tim sort of filming these people. Got camera right in their face and we're just telling them to act normally. This is the Taekwondo-ready position that they all have to adopt all the time. And down here they've got ball bearings in their trousers, which make their trousers hang particularly straight and give them a clinking noise when they walk, I guess to intimidate people. Just one of the most bizarre places I have ever been on. I'll never forget it. And actually another reason I'll never forget it is because I had one of the scariest experiences of my life. Here again, a little bit, just down the border really, is the military demarcation line. And this is, you're about to see, this is a bridge that extends from one side to the other, which they swap prisoners on this bridge at the end of the war. It's called the Bridge of No Return. And I went out on the bridge looking pretty nervous. Look at me, I'm looking pretty nervous here. I'm looking slightly concerned. These guys came out to guard me. Over there is North Korea. And the American colonel who was in charge of the troops on that bridge at the time told me that there'll be a sniper covering me all the time. But don't worry, if he shoots, you'll be dead before you hear the bang. Usually I take, 2 or 3 goes, maybe even 10 goes to say my words right. That time, fun enough, with North Koreans having rifle crosshairs on the back of my head, I was word perfect the first time. Bizarre what you can do when someone's about to shoot you. The interesting thing about the Korean War is it's very much a battle of huge numbers. The Chinese had huge numbers of troops, and the Americans and the Brits would have small numbers of troops, but much better technology. So we looked at the effect that artillery would have. And we went down to Salisbury Plain, where the British Army do their artillery training. We sat in a bunker and were shelled by the British Army. Even in this bunker, you can actually feel the shockwaves go through you. Oh, you're telling me you can. Unfortunately, we put one of our cameras on the roof to try and record what was going on, and predictably enough, that is what happened to the camera. And here you go, here's the next one. 1 times a BBC camera utterly destroyed by shrapnel. So at least it shows that the British Army are pretty good. They managed to hit a tiny camera on the top of the bunker, so that's pretty effective. Well, that's about it for this week's video podcast. I hope you enjoyed it. Don't forget that on bbc.co.uk/history you can get all the podcasts, and also on there you can leave us comments and questions and we'll have a look at them. Well, I've been unhealthily glued for another week to the message board. Thanks for all the comments. This time I'm going to talk about 2 from a person called Watching Lord. I'm sorry to the rest of you, but he does seem to, or she does seem to have generated a lot of other interest from other people. And the first question is about the British Army. There's been lots and lots of debate on this. Why did it take so many years for the British Army to adapt its tactics for modern warfare? Now, I assume that's really talking about the First World War. We've had lots of comments on there about things like lions led by donkeys, oh, it's full of toffs and the British Army is rubbish. I think actually there's a lot of historians looking again at the First World War, and actually those 4 years of the First World War are a time of extraordinary innovation, really more revolutionary transformations going on than at any time in the British Army's history. In 1914 they went into battle much like they had done in 1815 at Waterloo, lined up, neatly walking towards enemy trenches. By 1918 it looks like the Falklands. It's small groups going forward, using all sorts of combined arms, using artillery, armoured vehicles, things like that. So I think actually It didn't take that long for the British Army to adapt, but of course it seemed like it took a long time because so many people died in the interim. 1917, the tragedy of Passchendaele. Although lessons were being learnt, the weather was awful, mistakes were still made. I think the lesson that I get from the First World War is that modern warfare is really, really difficult. And if you want to be good at it, you've got to have a big army that's prepared for it, has the right kit, and trains and trains and trains. And the British Army didn't have that at the outbreak of war. Watching Lord's second question is about a programme that went out a couple of weeks ago, so I hope you'll bear with me, but it seems to be quite live. Midway was a major battle in the Pacific War. What about other significant battles like the Leyte Gulf? And I mean, you're absolutely right. Again, we had 8 programmes. We can't do justice to it, really. It'd be fun to have a battlefield series all about the war in the Pacific. You're quite right. The Leyte Gulf, I think the biggest naval battle in history, and one that was surprisingly close, given that the Americans were pretty resurgent by that stage. The Kokoda Trail is one that I'm fascinated by, when the Australians and Japanese fought it out in the unimaginably tough conditions of Papua New Guinea, and to this day, Kokoda Trail is something that Australians do aspire to walk across as a sort of coming of age thing. I've got Australian friends who've gone and done that. The reason we chose Midway was simply that was the point when the Pacific War could have gone either way. The forces were quite equally matched, and it was a dramatic day in which the balance of power, the sort of momentum of the Pacific War swung dramatically from one side to the other. But you're absolutely right, there are lots of others out there like Iwo Jima, Leyte Gulf. It's a tough decision. Next time, we are looking at the Vietnam War. Flushed from its success, holding back communism in Korea, America attempted to do the same in Southeast Asia, Vietnam. And we're going to be looking at the Tet Offensive, at this great moment in 1968 when the tide really turned against America in that war. So join us next week, BBC 2, 9 p.m. Monday, and afterwards, don't forget the video podcast.